Welcome back, everyone. I'm Kaya Carrington-Russell, Australian award-winning author of contemporary romance and kick-butt heroines in dark fantasy worlds. And I have a very special guest for you today. We are talking Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author, known for her sexy feel-good romances with over 100 books written. Known for books such as Mr. Trouble and Cheeky Royal, we are talking to the one and only Nana Malone. How are you today?
Hi guys. Hi. Thanks. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you on. Everywhere I've seen you, like high energy, and I'm just like, yes, let's get her on here. So I'm
I,
so
I hope I hope I'm bringing the energy. Oh my gosh, what if I'm tired today? Oh no. I'm gonna rally. I'm bringing it.
I'd love to see you on a low energy day. I feel like that would be my high energy day. So you're doing amazing.
It's funny. People are always like, "Oh my God, you're so energetic." I'm like, "Am I?" Like, I don't even see it at this point. I'm just like, I don't. I guess.
Like just
I
dance to my own
mean,
tune.
yeah.
Take me back to the start. Where did your writing and publishing journey begin, and how did you find publishing?
Oh, well, way back, four score and 7 years ago. No, I started writing back in 2001. So yeah, right before September 11th. And it was the summer. I was working this god awful PR job, public relations job in New York City. And in my head, it was like going to be very Sex in the City, and it was like I was looking young. Yeah, no, I was very bad at my job. I can look back and say that now. I was really terrible at it, and they worked us to the bone. And so I was like constantly on a train, on a bus, going somewhere, taking something to a client. And it was the summer that Bridget Jones's Diary came out, and so like I was seeing this book everywhere on the train, on the bus. I can still see the eyes. I can still see the cover. I see the whole thing. And so I took my behind to Borders, rest in peace, Borders. It was a bookstore many, many moons ago. And it was right there in that kind of like front display case where it's like, as readers, we don't know that that's a paid placement. But I was like, oh, this must be the best kind of book, right? And so I got a copy, and like on the train home, I was already immersed, and I was like, I didn't even know where it came from, but I was like, I could do this. It was the first time, like, and I love to read. I read everything. I was constantly reading. I was the only 9-year-old, running around with my own Agatha Christie complete collection, which says a lot about what I write now, but that's not the point. But, I had never like put it together with writing my own books before. And that book, it was irreverent. It was funny. It was, so self-deprecating. And I was like, I can do this. And I didn't know I was responding to voice. And I was like, oh, but that sounds like how me and my friends would talk to each other. And so when I finished the book in like 3 hours or something ridiculous, and I closed it, and I was like, I'm gonna write a book. I mean, like right then and there, I dragged out my very heavy, what was it, a compact laptop? Tells you how old I am. 29 again.
25.
25, we're going 25. I don't think I can pull out 25. Like, I just feel like there's a level of like 25-year-old me was not very smart. So we'll go with 29. And so I just started hacking. I was I knew nothing about conflict, motivation, and goal. I was working on vibes. That was what I was doing. I was like, vibes, I can do this. And it took me 8 years to finish that book. I mean, I went to grad school and traveled and went to Ghana, and like I did a whole bunch of stuff and moved to San Diego eventually. But I was like a project manager at a company and hating the company. The job I liked, the company I did not. And my husband, I mean, it was terrible. It was far. The bosses were mean. I mean, it was like crying every day on the way home. And my husband just looked at me one day, and he was like, what would make you happy? He's like, you've been talking about writing this book forever. He's like, you never seem to finish it. Shit or get off the pot. And I was like, but at the same time, I was like, don't you dare me. Don't give me a challenge. And I finished it. Like, I finally just sat down and was like, no, just get it done. And immediately started looking for an agent and all that stuff. And I had a couple of bites. But when you write, you polish those first 3 chapters to the nth of your life. And then you maybe don't do that for the rest because you also just don't know what you don't know. I mean, especially the first book. And it was apparently not what they were looking for. And it was terrible. I mean, if I'm being honest. And what was really funny is I had a mentor, and she's still a very good friend of mine today. And she, poor thing, I can't believe I made her read it several times. But she was like, "This is great. So proud of you. Write another one." And I was like, "No, no, no, but this book's gonna make me millions. And this is the one." Because we were dumb then, back in the Paleolithic era of romance. And she was like, "Write another one." And I enrolled in more classes, and I was like, "I can't take 8 years. That's silly. I can't." And so I enrolled in a lot of classes, joined RWA, all the things, and got critique partners, and like really just figured out. And then it took me 6 months to write the next one, and that's the first one I sold.
Amazing. And so what year and what book was that? And was that to an agent?
Yeah, so that was to an agent. That was Game Set Match 2010.
Okay.
I was a baby, obviously.
15 then you would have been.
I was 15. The lies, the way I'm like, stop doing math, you guys, stop doing math.
Like if you're 15, you're writing the first book for 8 years. All right, we're coming into an interesting how wise you were.
Stop doing math.
So that's incredible. So how did you feel when you went into that world and then you had your first book published? How quickly or slow, should I say, was it until you started noticing that momentum? And when could you go full time?
That's a good question. I mean, what I will say is that as great as Game Set Match is, and I love that book very much, when you're dealing with a publisher, especially when you're brand new, you don't know what you don't know. And especially then, I let them define everything about my career, like the cover was terrible. And I was like, I guess I was like, oh, but like you didn't have any say. Like you still don't have a lot of say when it comes to covers. And you just kind of go along. And I got my first check, and it was for $56.73. And I was like, it's missing some zeros. And it was like right around then, like the Kindle had just come out. And that same mentor, Misty Evans, she's fantastic. She writes like amazing romantic suspense. And she was like, "Listen, you need to come over to this indie world." And I was like, "Oh, no, 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 no." And I was in the middle of submitting this kind of like paranormal romance. It was right around the time the show Heroes was on. I don't know if you guys got in Australia, but I loved Heroes. And so it was like kind of a take on that, super powered people. And it was like, I was like, oh, it's sort of paranormal. And so I was submitting for all these like paranormal anthology things. And I was getting rejected. And Misty kept pushing. She was like, "You need to just be indie." And I was like, "I don't, okay, maybe." And I took the book, and back then, especially, like everyone was calling themselves an editor, kind of like now, but like people were calling, you were just like, you found an editor, and they're like, oh, but then it's like people who are like used to editing lit fic, and they're like, "This book is dirty," and all that kind of stuff. But I found an editor, I put it up on Kindle, and in less than a couple of hours, I made the same amount of money in my account that I had made over several months of Game Set Match being out. And I was like, oh, okay. But back then you don't know what you don't know. So like there I've got this like, superhero romance, which isn't a thing. Guys, don't do it. It's not a thing. But if someone wants to make it a thing, I'm right behind you. I will buy every single copy. But I'd written this rom-com at first, and then I wrote this like weird thing that no one knew where to put it. And then I was like, oh, I need to figure myself out. Mm-hmm. And so I had this idea for this really fun series rom-com about these like three best friends living in San Diego, and one of them pulls a Carrie Bradshaw and spends like too much money on shoes after she gets fired from the family business by her dad. And I was like, but like it wouldn't leave me alone. And that was the kind of like the first time, like, I mean, Game Set Match was different because that story kind of was like what if, and it just like kind of built from that. But this was kind of like I could see them in my head. I could feel them as real people. They were tangible. And I told anyone who would listen, my poor husband, I talked about it a lot. And he was like, okay, write it, I guess. I don't know. And I was working a different PR job. And it was just like the stress, not PR, project management. And it was just the stress of it. Like, I mean, I don't know if you guys know project management. It's like Sundays, like you just, especially if you're working for small outfits, it's very stressful because you're managing like a bunch of balls in the air and you're like praying that everything falls worth, and you plan out like to the nth degree. You're like, if this goes wrong, then this is a contingency and this is the budget. And then like the boss will walk in and be like, no, I want to do this instead. And you're like, are you kidding me? And my husband was looking at me and I was like, writing is just making me so much happier. And that series was the Insulettas series with Sexy and Stilettos. And it was my first kind of big check with Amazon. Like when I was like, oh, this is a thing. Oh. And it was a really nice check. And I was like, well, oh, really then. And that was early 2012. And you know, once I saw what I could do, I think my brain just locked in. I went project management, but for books, I was like, the only thing holding me back is my ability to write quickly. Mm-hmm. If I can write faster and do more of this, then that's my salary. Great. You know, they don't tell you about things like burnout and so no one talks about all those other things. And so I mean, and I had my daughter then, so it was 2012, so she was like just about 2, like just like a little thing, a little chunky thing. And I learned to write faster using like, you know, Pomodoro methods. And because I, you know, figured out I could do anything in 15 minutes, anything, literally anything. Load of laundry, the dishes, the what, you know, like, and I was like, how many words can I write in 15 minutes? And once I keyed that in, it was easy to go, oh, through the course of the day, but it required focus. It required being able to like go right back into where you left off, or like understanding that if it was say 500 words, that was at least a partial scene and I would have to go back to it. And I managed that. I mean, I was working full time. I would wake up at the crack of dawn and I wouldn't even like, I would grab a hoodie and just go and sit at the kitchen table essentially and dictate or handwrite 500 words. Like I would do nothing else. I wouldn't get a drink of water. I wouldn't brush my teeth because it had to be like brain to laptop. Otherwise it wasn't going to happen. And if I could make that happen, the more often I made that happen, the faster I got, because I was like, oh, the words are coming. And, you know, and then it was like, you know, get the kid up, do all the things, and then get to work early and do another 15 minutes before the workday started, you know, and then you got 1,000 words, you know, and then at lunch, you know, you split it up and trying, and maybe like right before I leave, like I would try and leave the end of the day to just like give me 15 minutes before I had to go get my daughter at daycare, and squeeze in another 15 minutes. And then the end of the day was like, well, I've already got like 2,000 words. I just have to do 1,000 more. And I wrote several books like that, several. And then finally, at the end of 2012, I left that job.
Amazing.
I mean, it was a little premature because like some things were happening in my company that I was like, I can't, you know, but it was more premature than I probably would have been comfortable with. But I was like, well, I have to earn at least this much every day to keep doing this.
Yeah.
Oh God. And that's essentially it. So about 2 years after I started, I went full time. And I've been full time, God, for it's over a decade now. The idea of going back to work for someone now, I'm like,
yuck. Firstly, when you talk about project management, I used to do logistics management. So I understand you.
You understand.
When you said it, I'm like, I feel you. And again, same thing. I burnt out doing that full time because it's not 40 hours. It's never 40 hours a week.
It's never 40 hours.
Never 40
That's
hours.
such a fallacy.
100%. But it's interesting because hearing obviously your timeline up until this point, it sounds very much like you used to be, and I'm curious if you still are, a bit of a mood writer, a vibe writer, like you were getting inspiration from Bridget Jones and then Heroes. And as soon as you're like, I love this, I'm going to write something, obviously not the same, but you're like, I'm inspired by this kind of theme, let's go with it. So I'm curious as to and you've spoken about dictation and handwriting. What does your writing process look like now? Are you a plotter or a pantser? Do you write dictation? What happens?
Mhm. Yeah, no, good question. Yeah, no, so I'm a plotter. I'm a hardcore plotter. That's how my brain works. I have to know if I have a map, I can go quickly. If I have no map, 8 years is what happens. And so that's obviously not going to work for a long-term career. But there are pantsers that are able to get it done. Like, I mean, there's so many pantsers that are just like able to be like, oh, and then this happens. And I was like, how did you even think about that without a roadmap? I do dictate now. I have a torn labrum in my right shoulder. I'm doing Krav Maga martial arts.
So
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. I mean, I miss it so much. If there was like one thing I could go back to in my life, like not even dance, like that is what I would go back to. But it's not so much mood. It's more I'll get inspiration. If I'm in the middle of something, I will give myself like 500 words. I allow myself to have that. So if like there's like something that's like talking to me and it just won't go away, I'll just open a document, give it like it'll just go into my ideas folder. I'll open a document and bang out 500 words, and then that's enough to like. And then whatever I'm writing is done, like, and now it's much different because like I've got after hearing Bella Andre talk at RWA one year, and she was like writing a bloody series. I finally clicked and I was like, oh, jumping around does not tell readers, it doesn't like, engender reader expectations. So, but when I'm done with a series or whatever, I'm nearing the end, kind of like I am now, I start kind of looking around at the idea list. I'm like, and I see what excites me. And I'm like, but can I write that for 3 books at least? When you have like a long series, it's really hard to be like, oh, okay, we're still in this series. So
How do you find? I'm curious about dictation a little bit because I've never done it. And I don't know how and if I would be able to. Obviously, it's each their own. So how did you find that? Can you tell us a little bit about how dictation works for you?
sure. For me, I have an easier process. Now, I've tried everything, literally from Dragon, which has like at the time, like 85% accuracy. And if you know me, I hate to edit with the strength of 1,000 suns. So the idea that I have to clean it before I can even read it, to then do my revisions, to then eventually send out to my editor, to then get it back, to have to touch it again and again and again. No. And so if we're adding another layer of revisions in there, I'm like, I don't want to do it. And it was horrible because it was gobbledygook. I talk fast. B, sometimes the accent is off. And C, it's just not catching up. And there's a lot of latency issues. So I ditched that. But if you name a dictation app, I've tried it. But my current process right now looks like I just grab my phone, I record into my phone, and then I send it to a transcriber person that I have in the Philippines. She sends it back, and it's mostly clean. I would say like 98% accuracy. And she'll like read it and kind of try and fix anything that she thinks of. But we have like some flubs because I'm like, I'm talking fast, or maybe there's noise or something. And then I recently started using an alpha reader. I was like, I need someone else to like compile this and whatever. I mean, it's working out. I mean, she's good, but like, I also very much don't like someone else's opinion when I'm writing. So I'm just like, no, it's cute, but I don't like, no, stop giving me opinions. So that may or may not work out, but like, she is very much helping me at least keep it clean so that when it comes in to me, I didn't have to do an extra layer of stuff. And then I can just read it and go, what was I thinking? And then make my edit. So that's what it looks like for me. A lot of people are different. I mean, dictation, it takes a minute to adjust and get used to. There are some people who are like, oh, do you use punctuation? I'm like, I do. And the problem is when I'm having a conversation, sometimes I'll be like, period, comma. And I'm like, no, no, that's not. So if that happens, sorry. But that, you know, I'm a person who uses the punctuation when I dictate. I have to,
Yeah.
because I can see it. I'm like, it's like I'm typing it in my head and my brain as I'm going, because I'm not physically seeing it on the screen.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get great results and sometimes you don't.
That's so interesting. I'm gonna try it. I'm very curious just to yeah. I imagine it'd be very different. I'm very curious by it.
It
Um
is it is hard. One thing I will say, if you do want to try it, because this is just for you or anyone curious. When I did it first for Cheeky Royal. I had to speak as I typed it. So that was the first book I had done full dictation for. So if you talk at the same time that you're typing and say what you're, without looking at the screen, because that kind of, then you're just reading. But like if you're like saying the words and you're like, pick a point on your computer that's not the keyboard so that you can type properly, but like pick a point and just say the words as you're typing them, you'll find that you connect your mouth to your brain and then it becomes easier. Because that's the number one problem, this connection, because it's usually this connection, hands and brain. It's like, yeah, no, of course. But that's a little chunk for you.
oh, I thank you for that advice. I'm gonna definitely try that. I'd love to talk about your new release, Broken Trust. So you had co-written this as well, which I'd love to get into a bit of co-writing, but with M. Malone, which honestly, I thought you two were the same person. It took me a
Get
while.
that a lot.
It took me a while to realize, no, they are co-writers. Yeah, tell me a little bit about Broken Trust and your co-writing experience and any advice you have.
So they're co-written with this is our new Broken series. It's co-written, well, it's not really new, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Broken Trust is following a group of like former assassins who are now in the security business. They've left that life behind. But you know, sometimes they have the tendency to still want to kill things if someone's being mean, but they're security experts and they want to help the little person and help. Like, I loved the show, and not so much the movie, but the show, The Equalizer, like the old one from the 80s. Not, I mean, no disrespect to Queen Latifah because she's amazing, but she should not be in the show. But like I used to love that show, and I was like, oh, he helps people? What? And he protects them, and he's an ex-spy? Yes. And so we really loved that concept and idea. And so they, you know, they're all ex-assassins. And then of course, you know, so in the first one, Broken Trust, it's Noah, and he you know, it's his brother, his best friend's little sister. And since his best friend died, he's been looking out for her and taking care of her. But of course, you know, he's got those feelings, Ant's feelings, and he's trying to ignore them and he can't. And it is a fun, wild ride. So Noah and Lucia were great to write. And Minx and I, we originally did the series. Like, so some of you are going to be like, that sounds really familiar. If you read the Shameless series, it is the Shameless series reimagined. So we've added more content to it. And then they were cliffhangers before. So now it's one book, and then it's KU, which we never did before. So it was fun to revisit that. And like, as we're like going through the book, we're like, oh, why did we say it like that? No. And which just shows, like, as you grow as a writer, you want to just re-edit yourself a lot of times. But and then we added like new information and new contacts and, you know, new epilogues and all that kind of stuff. So it's, and oh yeah, and it was third person. I don't know what we were thinking. Now first person. So like we basically overhauled the books,
Yeah.
which was, it was actually fun to revisit them.
What advice would you have for anyone who is thinking about co-writing?
Oh, I have done 4 or 5 co-writes. I will say, and like 2 of them have been fantastic. Like, would 100% recommend all the time. It's more than just writing with your friend.
Yeah.
And it's more than just like having similar styles. Like, you really have to gel in terms of like how you approach editing and how you approach writing and how you approach like outlining, and everyone being on the same page. Because it's one thing to be like, oh, this person does really well, that makes good sense. It's more about like, can you, like, more than like, because with your friend, you're also going to be tend to like hold your words and be nicer, you know, when you communicate things like that was hot garbage. But because sometimes it needs to be said. But it helps if you both know your strengths. And it helps if you're working with someone who has opposite strengths to you. And it helps. The one thing where it does help, where if you guys are the same, is like your approach to marketing, and how you are planning to pitch the book and planning to sell that, because that's not the place that you can have any time for like opposing thoughts or ideas. Like that's just not going to work, because you have to be lockstep in selling it. But in terms of the process, I mean, like Minx and I, we write similarly. We've been friends for years, and she's really easygoing. Like I only get like about very specific things, and she knows that, so she doesn't. But it's only very specific things. Everything else, I'm like, I don't care. Just I don't know. What do you think? Sure, we'll do that. Like, I mean, it's very specific things. And she's like really, really great at ads. So it's always like, hey, what do you think about the ads? What should we do? How do we change it? Or if I hear something about ads, then I'm like, hey, have you taken Sky Warren's class? Let's take it.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So that, because I know she's really good at them, I'm just like so at them. So I'm like, you're the one with the skill set. Let's get some more information. Or, or she's like, oh, the blurb isn't quite, I put it in my newsletter and no one clicked it or whatever. Like then it's like, oh no. So then we workshop those things. And it's worked like that with one of my other co-writers. Other ones have not been so amazing.
Yeah.
Like maybe the writing process has been great. But like marketing is a problem, or the person just doesn't really believe in editing, or whatever the case is, like, or they don't like to do it, and then you are under pressure being the one to do it. So just, you really have to understand all the facets. Like it's more than just, I want to write with my friend, which is great, but think about it, you're also like combining money with a friend, which sometimes
doesn't work. It's very much a marriage, isn't it? Making
oh my
sure.
god, 100%, because you're married forever.
Yeah.
Even if you break up, and there have been some like very high profile co-write teams that have like recently broken up, and I'm like, guys, so who's watching the bank accounts?
I would love to know about the brown nipple challenge that you started. So, and I saw that you also was it lyric audio books that you
Yeah, so yeah, we spun off a little piece for audio called Audio in Color.
yeah. So I would love to know what the brown nipple challenge is, and most importantly how we can get behind and support it.
100%, thank you. So the Brown Nipple Challenge, it really started in 2020 as kind of, we were all locked in the house, and we were like, people were finally becoming more awake to the injustices that people of color face in the US, but also worldwide. Like what was fascinating to me was that it was a worldwide phenomenon, and people like coming out in support, and it was just, I mean, it was really moving. And I mean, but it was also like terrifying, because like every day my husband leaves the house, I'm just a little bit like, every time my daughter goes to school, I'm still a little bit like what could someone say to her today that's going to like crush a little spirit, right? And so I wanted to do something more than just protesting or being online and just like screaming at people. And in my career in romance, I've been very fortunate, and people have helped me along the way. Like sometimes by accident, and sometimes they didn't mean to help me. But there were a lot of things that, like, as an author of color, I didn't have access to. There was a lot of gatekeeping, especially in the early days. But the more I kind of like learned and became friends with people, people were like, oh, do you know about this? And I'm like, no. And they're like, come on. And what I wanted to do, especially in 2020, I think there were a lot of people who wanted to read more diverse, and who were like, and they would say things out loud with their whole chest, like, but I don't even know where to find authors of color. And I'm like, is your Google broken? Because watch, I'm gonna go there right now and be like, romance books written I'm like, multicultural romance books. Look,
Yeah.
P.S. I turn up, which is really weird, and like people would just say things like, I don't know where to find these things. And I'm like, what? And so I wanted to take out that kind of like, I'm like, hey, everyone should read The Vegetables, because there were a lot of people coming out and being like, oh, you should read this book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, da 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 da, all these things. And I was like, yeah, 100% vegetables. Vegetables is work. And a lot of people stopped eating their vegetables because it's inconvenient and it feels like work and it's tiring. And they're just like, oh, I just feel bad about life and the world in general. I'm like, yeah, well, welcome to being a person of color walking around the world. But I was like, it's not just vegetables. There's an easy way to do this, is maybe read especially in the romance community, read romances by people who don't look like you.
Yeah.
I do it all the time. Like I was like, it's really simple. You pick up a book and you're like, oh, I, I, I didn't even know.
Yeah.
This is great, like, I mean, I'm like, oh, I've read this book and the heroine's South Asian and she has all these cultural contexts that I'm like, and I have lots of South Asian friends, and I was like, I didn't know this was a thing, I mean, so like it's a very easy thing to do. So I wanted to highlight authors of color who were writing romance. Like I was like, one thing I can do is at least like solve a part of the problem of people being like, I can't find these books. Lies. But I can at least solve that problem in a way that's sustainable. And one of the things, instead of just recommending books, because people do that all the time, they're like, go read this, it's great. Or I love this, oh my God, it's amazing. That's nice. And you might get one or two people who are like, oh, so-and-so said it's amazing. But one of the things I realized was that word of mouth and actually you talking to the person. And I'd witnessed that myself. Like when I go to a signing, if I do a panel, all of a sudden after the panel, all these people are in my line because they got to know me even just a little bit. Because then they're like, oh, she's really fun. I have to go see what she writes. Right. And so in that conversation, just highlighting the person and being like, hey, it's a book club. We're reading this month. Go, we're reading Kimberly Lemming's like I Got Drunk and Saved a Werewolf. I have to go look at the title in a minute for next month. But depends on when this airs. But like that title in and of itself and like being able to have a conversation with her is going to be really fun for people because with a title like that, she's fun.
Yeah.
And so being able to have that conversation and have readers be like, oh, I've never met her before. Now I have to go read everything she writes. Yeah. Yes, that's and putting money in the pockets of these women, because one of the problems about the industry is that if you don't have knowledge of what's happening or like access, and then you can't do the thing and earn money to then be able to grow your business to keep doing the thing. And then if you don't have money, a lot of times you can't get access. And so it's like this awful, it's like your career can't grow and all you can do is like keep growing this tiny little bubble and you can't ever break out of it. And so I wanted to just be able to be like, hey, if you love my books, great, awesome, but you will also love these authors who write just like me. When I think that was the key. I was like, because people, like when I first started it, like there were a lot of authors like, I want to support you. I'm like, great, you can have your own Brown Apple challenge. You can join in on this one and just tell everyone that we're doing it. The chat with the authors on this date, join us, come discuss. You can do it in your own group, that sort of thing. And they're like, oh, but like, who can we select? Like, who do we? And I was like, first of all, go to Google, find an author. And then people were like, oh, I want to do, Kennedy Ryan, for example. She's a very good friend of mine. And I'm like, Kennedy's amazing. Also, why don't you, since you write small town romance, why don't you do Farrah Rashan, who is also amazing? Because you trying to get your small town romance folks to be like, oh my God, I love Kennedy. They will also love Kennedy, but they will also really, really love Farrah because Farrah writes small town romance. So that's an easy jump.
Yeah.
It's an easy jump. Like, don't tell your small town romance folks that they should come read Nana Malone. That doesn't really fit because I'm talking about spies who are boning in coat closets or wardrobes, depending what part of the world that you live in. But like, the small town romance person is going to be like, oh, this is dangerous. Oh my. I mean, they'll probably enjoy it. At the same time, that's more of a leap, right? But if you write super angsty, super emotional, like make you cry before you feel better romance, Kennedy Ryan is a great read for you. Like, you must read her. I mean, everyone should read her anyway, but like, that's an easy thing to be like, I write all this stuff. Who you should read next is this person until like while you're waiting for my book to come out. That makes sense. So that was the idea behind the Brown Apple Challenge. It's a book club. So like I said, we're reading Kimberly Lemming. The Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Werewolf, I think, is the one. And the covers are adorable. It's a little more fantasy, but like I read the sample and I was like, oh no, sounds like me. This is my people are going to have no problem jumping right in, even though there is a werewolf. And then Andy Arndt from Lyric Audiobooks reached out to me and she's like, oh my God, how do we support you? And I mean, I was like, it's a book club. Read the book. I don't know. join. I had nothing to say, nothing to offer, and she like would not leave me alone, which I love about Andy. And she was like, we need to do something. And she goes, but the first two books you picked didn't have audio. And I was like, I know, but like, because if you're an author of color and you haven't had access to audio, and audio is not cheap, so you haven't had access, so you don't necessarily know that there are ways to get it in an affordable manner, what are you supposed to do? And she's like, we're going to fix that. And I was like, I was just along for the ride. And she was like, come on, let's go. And we're going to resolve this. And then we came up with this whole kind of grant program, and we got an angel investor who was like, we're going to help you. And I was like, this is amazing. And so suddenly it became a nonprofit. And I was like, I don't spend, but okay. But it allowed us to like produce 8 books, 8 audiobooks. Like a couple of years ago, early last year, and it was amazing. And one of those has been finaled for an Audi, Crushing on You by Jen Trin, it was so fun. And what I loved about that book is that the main character, she's not like your typical likable heroine. Like people, like you see the review, people are like, oh, I didn't like the heroine. I was like, but you know, she deserves love too. And misogyny is also coming from inside the house. But like, it was like a different kind of heroine. And I was like, oh, this is really refreshing. And she finaled. And like the fact that we were able to even have a small part in her journey is a huge deal. And it's very, very exciting. So like everyone cross your fingers for Jen Trin to win. That would just be
That's
amazing.
incredible. That's so incredible that you were, and unknowingly too, building a nonprofit as well in the process. Great cause as well. I'm, I want to say congratulations, like in so many ways, but I think there need to be more of us doing this. And I think in our own way, a lot of us do try and give back, in the sense that, you know, if we have a little bit of information, if we do this or if we do
Yeah.
that. And I guess I love that part of this industry as well. And
Yeah.
definitely jumping on support and going to be pushing you to this nonprofit. And I can't wait. Is there anything else coming up or?
Yeah, so we've just actually opened up like our next funding round. So actually I had recorded a video. If you see my phone, I just recorded a video that I was about to post of me like, we're doing another funding round. Go ahead and click the link and give us some money so we can continue. I mean, and the last time we did this, I mean, it was a surprise. I don't know why I was surprised, but Romance Landia was like, you're doing this? Amazing. Here is money. I mean, we didn't even have a GoFundMe. We weren't asked. We had like funding. And so we were just like announcing it. We're like, yeah, it's gonna be great. Please, can we get some submissions? And people, I still remember Julia Kent, who's amazing. She emailed me. She was like, where do I send you money? And I'm like, we don't need money. I don't need money. And she was like, if you do not tell me where to send this money, like you're just gonna get an envelope full of cash. I'm like, let's get a better basket. And so we put up the GoFundMe, and all these romance authors and readers were just like, this is great, and just helped us fund a whole extra audiobook. So that was, I mean, that was incredible. And just the program has been just, for me, I'm just like, I just started a little thing because I was feeling frustrated and wanted to do something. And then it became this whole thing, which has been very exciting.
Something so positive and incredible came out of it. I absolutely love
Yeah,
it.
which has been really great.
What would you say so far in your publishing career has been the most challenging, and then your greatest achievement?
Oh boy. Well, the greatest achievement one is easy. It's survival. Um, because this industry it's difficult, and it's difficult when you take your hobby, something you love to do, like in your spare time, and make it a job and make it your career. And we've seen a lot of authors just kind of, and you just don't hear from them anymore. And I think longevity has been my greatest achievement, and just being able to still be part of the industry, still love writing as much as I do. And still, I mean, you fight through burnout, you have it again, and you're like, how did we end up here again? But so I think my greatest achievement has been just longevity and survival, because it's not easy, especially when you're indie and you don't have like any like bolstering like trad behind you. Like, I mean, I've been trad and I've had trad deals before, but it's not the same. I think probably the most difficult thing, like the most challenging, I mean, possibly it's the same thing, the survival, because every day is a new challenge. Every day is a new, like, oh Jesus, what now? How am I going to solve this problem today? Or characters isn't cooperating, or whatever the case is. I think the challenge is also that it's very isolating. When you have and the people that you do have that you can talk to, sometimes like Zoom is great, but sometimes it's hard not having a person to physically to drag you out of bed if that's what you need, or B, to be like, I brought you cookies, open the door, when you're like, I'm not leaving the house ever again. I mean, sometimes you just need that. You just need a kick in the ass for motivation, or a hug, or whatever. And so that kind of thing is difficult, the connections. But the survival of it is also the hard thing, because you don't know when you're just like, and I'm done.
And I find it interesting. I've been publishing since 2014, so it's been a while, but not as a couple of years on me. But it's so interesting having these conversations on here, because everyone addresses burnout, which I love, because it's something that needs to be spoken about more
Oh yeah.
often. And how we can really navigate around it. And also, there's so much pivoting. The industry is changing constantly from what it looks like in 2014 when I was a little baby author to now. I'm just like, how am I still relevant? How have I been able to keep changing? And also that we need to give ourselves permission to have rest periods, to be
Yeah.
okay with not publishing 20 books a year, because not everyone can stick to that. So figuring out what your routine is and what your dance is, and making sure that you still love it. I am curious as to what your advice would be for any new authors, or even authors who have been in it for a while, who might be having that negative talk at the moment. What would you say to them?
The negative talk. I would I want to be like the hardcore project manager. I'm like, snap out of it. You're not helping yourself, but that doesn't do anything. But you're not helping yourself. The key is to actually be kind to yourself. Don't say anything to yourself that you wouldn't say to your best friend. I find if that's a good rule, because I'll start. If a release hasn't gone well, I'm like, I'm the worst writer. I'm like, would you say that to so and so? And I'm like, no, okay. And to really kind of be aware of the things that are coming out of your mouth. Be aware when you're like, oh, I can't afford to do it, or I can't do this. But you're closing off your avenues of what's possible, what's available. We're getting a little woo-woo here, but you don't want to close off those avenues. And you want to really, self-care is such a buzzword thing now, but the moment you feel even a little anxious or a little stressed out, is a good marker to do something good for yourself. Whether it's a workout or a walk, or just sitting down and have a glass of wine, or it's, whatever it may be that makes you feel and to be able to take a deep breath, step back, because you can't, in project management, it's you can't, under stress, you don't make good decisions. That's why you plan, so that you can have a contingency. If I need to give my best engineer 3 days off, I can do that, because he's useless to me if he's burnt out and can't work. And so I'm like, why would I do that for that person and not for myself? So you just really, I think that's the best advice that I can give. Oh, and start a newsletter. If you're brand new, just have a newsletter. I know social media seems great. You don't own it. Start a newsletter.
Perfect. Well, actually, quickly, what is your 3 top marketing tips and advice? Obviously, newsletter is one.
Newsletter. Newsletter and newsletter and newsletter. I want to say, I would love to be yes, really learn your ads and Facebook. No, well, because the problem is they change at any given moment without notice. So what I will say is newsletter, and then I will say figure out how to do direct sales. That's kind of the war drum that the authors are starting to beat now. Is you want to be able to say, hey guys, I've got a sale. If you don't say, you don't get a book club that month, right? But you still want to be able to push people into your new release, which is how I use BookBubs a lot. And you're like, I don't have a BookBub, whatever. I can pay for other smaller newsletters, but I want them to really grab this book, read the book, and then do the thing at the end that tells them about the whole new book. One great way is if you have your own direct sales, you you don't need BookBub. You just, I mean, I have my direct sales. I use PayHip and BookFunnel to deliver. It's really great that I can be like, psst, just for you guys, exclusive sale. It's on sale for 99 cents. And suddenly you'll see all these people who have never, and you're like, but how did you get here? If you've never read me, here. But really figure that out. Whatever, however you may, like whether it's Shopify or whatever, like it doesn't matter, but figure out direct sales, and your newsletter.
Number one newsletter. I love it.
Number one and two newsletter, because I want to say, yes, really figure out this TikTok thing and they're great. They're great auxiliary things, but if you are counting on them, you are going to be in pain. If you're counting on ads, you're going to be in pain because things will change. I still, as we say in Ghana, with my big self, I still haven't figured out AMS ads. I've been an author for how long? I mean, I still don't know how to make them profitable. So what? I'm just not going to do anything. Sure, I'm going to do some of it, but I'm working my newsletter. Yeah. I'm taking care of my newsletter. Like Patreon is great. I think Patreon is amazing. But however, I own all of their emails.
Yeah.
So that I can contact them. If you don't have touch of your people, then you're reliant on someone else, and that's gonna burn all of us at some point.
I have what's called speed dating with an author. So you and I are going to go on a very romantic date. I lit a candle, I created an ambience, but it's basically 5 rapid questions. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. What is the clumsiest moment you've ever had?
Oh my God. In London, I was doing my master's, went out with a friend, and we locked ourselves out of her house and we had to climb the back gate. I should also mention I was wearing a very short mini skirt, a Diana Ross afro, and called it a whole outfit. And so as we shimmied up the gate and over, skirt hooked on the back of it, ripped down, and just me in a thong and an afro and a smile.
And a smile. That's amazing. Did you write that in any of your books out of curiosity?
I don't think I put something similar in London Royals and London Soul, but it's not quite exactly as it happened. But yeah.
I love that. What are the 3 words that best describe you?
Driven, ambitious, and fun.
Love that. What is the song that best describes you?
Oh, come on. I think probably right now is, since it's like playing in my head, it's Ready or Not by the Fugees.
Oh,
Ready or Not, here we come, you can't hide. Yeah, that's right now. Yeah.
Because you're writing your like spy books at the moment.
I am, maybe because I am, or maybe because I just like have the energy and I'm like, yeah, no, like
let's get it.
Yeah, let's get it.
Love that. Who has been your favorite character to write and why?
Oh, it's so rude. I can't ask that question. Probably I would say, like, I could say Jaya from Sexy and Stilettos because she's the most like me. But I'll say Penny from Cheeky Royal because she's that person who just really wants to be good at what she does, and she's really, really terrible at it. Her whole family's been bodyguards like from the start of time, and she is a really bad bodyguard. She accidentally set a Duke on fire one time, and it wasn't her fault. Technically, he set himself on fire, and she jumped on him to put him out, but he blamed her. But whatever. She's really, really bad at her job, and then she gets assigned to the prince as his bodyguard because he won't see her coming because she's such a klutz and she's so terrible. So she's probably my favorite because I can like she's real, she's like, I'm really bad at this, but turns out she's not actually bad at this. It's just no one was teaching her how to be good in the way she needed to hear it.
I love that. Yeah. What is a unique talent or skill set that you have that not a lot of people know about?
I can tie a cherry stem with my tongue in under 10 seconds.
In under 10 seconds? Oh my gosh. That's incredible.
We've timed it. I mean, it's been a while since I've done it. So like, you're going to be like, Melbourne, let's go. Yeah. I can't do it, but I'll probably need a warm up moment or two. But yeah, usually under 10 seconds.
You'll have to practice before we meet at the signing at Rare in Melbourne. I have expectations now.
Yeah, no, we're going to have to find a long enough cherry stem, but we can do it.
I have had so much fun today. So
yeah, it was a blast.
I know, wasn't it just, you're stuck with me.
Excellent.
What is coming out? Yeah, what is coming out and where do we find you?
You can find me at the usual places. You can find me on my website, nanamalone.com, and you can join my newsletter right there. You can also find me on Instagram, Nana Malone Writer, on TikTok, Nana Malone Writer, on Facebook, Nana Malone Writer. Those are usually the places that I at least post. I'm not on Twitter, let's be real. I mean, I'm there, but I'm not there. And actually, I released one of my spy books, The Rook, last week. So if you love a second chance romance with, like, you know, a heroine who is not having any like crappy excuses about why he left her in the first place, you're gonna love The Rook. And it was out last week. The audio is coming. I'm still waiting. I don't have my files yet, but I will have them shortly. And then next up is it's Broken Ties. It's Broken Ties with my girl Mix Malone, and that's coming in April. And then right after that comes The Spy, which is one of the books in the Gentleman Rogue series, and that's very much like a very forbidden office romance with spies.
I'm picking all of them. I'm just like, I want to read all of those now.
They're off. I mean, Rook is live, but The Spy and Broken Ties are on pre-order, so you guys can go do their thing.
So, well, thank you so much for coming on today. And who knows, maybe we'll get you on next year and see where you're at.
Yeah, no, I would love to. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, that's all right. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye, guys.
Definitely. Bye, everyone.